Hey guys, I'm Norb.
And I am Mike.
And we are The Watchmen.
The men who watch.
Because if it's on a screen, we're watching it, talking about it, and sharing it with you guys.
So today we are going to do a show about the top 5 films of the decade. That's the 2010 decade. So basically from 2010 to 2020. And I'd like to give a special shout out to my nephew Michael in Chicago. He is an avid listener of our show. He also did his own podcast review show with his high school friends called The Fourth Wall. And I asked Michael if he had an idea for a show we could do, and he said, I'd love to see you guys do the top 5 films of the decade. And I thought that was a great idea. So that's what we're going to do. Michael is going to be attending the University of Missouri this fall and studying journalism. And Michael, this is for you. I really hope you become a film critic who can write terrific film reviews. I was a big fan of Roger Ebert, and I read all his reviews. I thought he was a brilliant writer. And when he died, no one has ever replaced Roger Ebert for me. So I would love to see you replace Roger, Michael. I wish you all the best as you head off to college and can't wait to see what you do.
All right. Thanks again, Michael, for the support and for the idea. And yeah, good luck. That would be awesome if you could take the place of Roger Ebert. That would be quite the accomplishment. So before we jump into this awesome list of movies from 2010, I guess to be clarified, 2010 to 2019, since 2020 starts the new decade, 2010 to 2019. And but before we do that, I just wanted to thank all of you who are watching on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate your support. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for future episodes. And for those of you who are listening on our podcast channel, thank you so much for your support, and please continue to listen and subscribe there as well. Okay, our top 5 movies from the 2010 decade. Mike, why don't you start off?
Just to put a little bit of place, the way I tried to figure this out, and again, I liked this challenge because I tend to head into 80s films when I'm talking about a certain top 5, just because those movies were so impressionable on me at the time. So the way I tried to figure this out is I pulled up the IMDb website and I categorized movies within this last decade. And there were over 100,000 films made in 10 years. And that in itself was amazing. You think that's like 10,000 films a year.
That's crazy.
So I had it listed out by popularity, and then I just started going through page after page. I spent a good hour just combing through titles. And I made a list, and then I whittled that list down to 5.
Okay, so before you do your 5, let me explain how I did mine. I approached mine a little bit differently, similar, because I also did my research, because I want to make sure I wasn't missing something that was jumping out. But we talk a lot about, actual recorded medium versus streaming things. And Mike's definitely the collector, as you guys know by now. He's the one who has the large, extensive disc collection, and I've got a handful of them compared to what he's got. But for me, as Mike knows, I only buy something if I really like the movie or if I feel like it has that high rewatchability factor. And so that's a big part of it for me, is that if I own the movie, it's a good chance that that's probably a reason why it belongs in my top 5 of a certain era. So that had a big part of what made me decide to put something on the list. If I owned it, it's most likely on my list here. So, but I did the same thing because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something. And it was hard because there's always a movie where you go, that's really good. I feel like I'm cheating a movie out of this list by not including it, but you got to draw the line somewhere. So top 5 was pretty tricky, but I feel pretty good about it. So I'm excited to see what yours are. I have a feeling we have very different movies here, but
I would be shocked if we have any overlaps at all.
Maybe one, but we'll see. Maybe one or two.
I think you're right, and I'm guessing I'm going to take a guess in my mind is what that one might be. So we'll see. So, and again, I narrowed my view down to 5 based on either how they affected me or what I felt they did for cinema. So my number 5 is Avengers Infinity War. Now, this is not Avengers Endgame. This is Avengers Infinity War, the first of the 2-parter. As the Avengers and their allies have continued to protect the world from threats too large for any one hero to handle, a new danger has emerged from the cosmic shadows. Thanos, a tyrant of intergalactic infamy, his goal is to collect all 6 Infinity Stones, artifacts of unimaginable power, and use them to inflict his twisted will on all of reality. Everything the Avengers have fought for has led up to this moment. The fate of Earth and existence has never been more uncertain. The reason I picked this movie is because I have talked about this extensively with you, Norb, but I have gotten frustrated when characters die and there's no feeling about it. And this movie's not new, so spoiler territory. But I saw this with my son Brett, and when Spider-Man died at the end, he was moved. He was upset. He was depressed. He kept asking me, where'd he go? I said, well, he's gone. I said, you saw, they all floated away like ashes. And I have never in my life seen him sad after a movie. And it reminded me of how I felt when Spock died. I was crying when Spock died, and Brett was sad. And inside I'm thinking, finally, a movie that affects someone when a character dies. And even case in point, my wife hadn't seen it yet, and a couple days later I said to Cynthia, I said, you need to see this. You need to go. Why don't you take Brett? I said, Brett, do you want to go see Infinity War with Mom? And he goes, no thanks. I'll pass. And he never says that. And he didn't want to go back and relive Spider-Man's death. So that's a big reason why that's my number 5, is because I can't think of any other movie of this last decade that has had an effect like this one did at the end.
That had a similar effect on my kids as well. They've never gotten emotional, and definitely not in a superhero movie like the Avengers. But they too were very affected. I think, Spider-Man was the youngest character on there. He definitely had a connection with our younger kids. So I think for them, they had that special affinity towards, towards that character. And when he died, they were also very sad. I think they even shed a little bit of watery eye tear at that moment. It is not on my top 5 list, however, but it definitely is one of my favorite Marvel movies that they came out with. So it was cool to have one that actually did tug at the heartstrings, because it's hard to do in this day and age, especially with those types of characters in a world where it's a lot of just mindless action and mostly comedy. To actually tug at the heartstrings is a pretty big achievement. So
it had a very tragic, sad ending, and it was done really well, how they all just faded away one by one to ashes, and you didn't know who was going to go next. And it just, when Thanos finally gets that gauntlet and gets to do what he wanted to do, it became tragic really fast, and that's just how it ended. Yeah. And as I learned, Brett didn't know there was going to be a part 2. He thought that was it. It was over.
Yeah. And for sure. And that's I think we all kind of were wondering, this just seems really doom and gloom. Is there any way out of this? It can't be. They certainly can't end like this. But you're also thinking, who's actually going to come back? Someone's going to come back, but I'm sure not everybody. And sure enough, it was tough to know who was going to survive in the end. But
they carried that through to the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, where at the end of all Marvel movies, they'd always have something at the end of the credits. And at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, they were exploring the quantum realm, and all of a sudden, Dr. Pym and the girl who plays the Wasp, they come back and they had faded to ashes. And I remember hearing an audible gasp in the movie theater.
Yeah.
It's like, they're dead.
What was that?
Yeah.
What happened? What's going on?
So they not only did it at the end of the movie, they continued it through other movies. So that's why I felt that movie deserves to be in my top 5 of the decade.
All right. Well, my top 5 is also a superhero movie, but not from the Avengers side. My number 5 is The Dark Knight. And The Dark Knight is the second of the more recent versions of the Batman saga, and it's the continuation of British director Christopher Nolan's reinvention of the Batman story, and it takes the story up to his primal confrontation with the Joker, the villain who among the wrongdoer gallery ranged against Batman is first among equals, here leading an unspeakable cabal of wise guys. So it's directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Christian Bale. Oh my gosh, am I on the wrong time frame here? Am I pre-2010? I guess I am.
The reason I asked you that question is because I would have put that in my top 5, but I knew it was before 2010.
And you know what's funny? As I was doing this, I was thinking why didn't I put Dark Knight in this show? And I realized I didn't because I was wrong. You know what? I'm gonna fix this because I actually had a different movie in place, and I'm gonna go back to what I originally had because I think I know that's why I left it off in the first place because I thought I just
Live TV,
slipped.
ladies and gentlemen, nothing like it.
All right, so that'll be for my 2000, the 2000 decade. So ignore all that. Correction, my number 5 is actually Life of Pi. In a struggle to survive, Pi and the tiger forge an unexpected connection that gives him daily motivation to live. Life of Pi is a tale of faith, hope, and the fight to survive. The survival story of a boy and a tiger on a lifeboat in the open sea, directed by Ang Lee and starring Suraj Sharma and a digital tiger. All right, now that I got my time frames correct now, thanks for that correction. This movie was one where the technology of the special effects behind the digital tiger really blew me away. And it was a great story, and I think the fact that I didn't even have the effects getting in the way of the storytelling, was just showed how amazing the special effects of this, this live creature was so well done. But the story was just so good. I was shocked to find out it was a digital tiger. So that just gave me more of an appreciation of this film. But I really liked the story. It was one that I didn't have much expectations when it first came out. It looked like kind of a fanciful, okay, it's a boy on a boat with his pet tiger. What's this all about? And then as you get into the story and his plight and his journey, why he's crossing, and then the tragedy that sends him off of the ship to survive on a lifeboat with this surviving tiger, and the way they made that whole story draw through, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of just a great, survival story of being out, alone as the only human being with just this animal to survive with. And the fact that they made this tiger so real looking and then I made that bond with it as if this was a real character was really the part that transcended, the level of effects at that time. And I really enjoyed that film. And so, especially when I consider how long ago those effects were done, and I see a movie like this new Into the Wild or whatever that show with Harrison Ford that's just now coming out with that horrible, terrible anger. It just drives me freaking insane that they're using this digital dog that looks terrible to tell the story, and
Call of the
Wild. Complete opposite reaction to what Life of Pi did with the tiger is completely failing my desire to see that movie. But that's on a whole nother point. This is number 5 on my list.
What's interesting is, for the same reason it's on your list is pretty much a similar reason why it's not on my list. And the reason it's not on my list is because in the visual effects world, it's well known that Rhythm and Hughes, the company that was doing the visual effects for that movie, was going under. They went bankrupt. And when Life of Pi got awarded the Oscar, Ang Lee did not mention Rhythm and Hughes in his speech as a way to even help them, because they were falling apart.
Yeah.
And it was really well publicized that a lot of resentment towards Ang Lee for not acknowledging Rhythm and Hughes in his acceptance speech, and actually other people that came up for Oscars acknowledged Rhythm and Hughes. And that to this day has made me not as much of an Ang Lee fan as I used to be. I don't know why he didn't acknowledge that, but he should have. And because in a world, visual effects is a difficult world, because there's been a lot of debate about how do visual effects companies survive when the director will keep telling them to do things when the money has run out. And of course, the visual effects houses want to make the director happy, so they work for free, and that's exactly what happened here. They wanted to make him happy, they wanted to be a team player, but the money ran dry and more work was asked of them. And so they did it, and they went bankrupt, and then the director doesn't even acknowledge him in his speech. So, yeah, a good movie. Good movie, for sure. I saw it as well, and it was good. But I can't put it in my top 5 because of my feelings about how Rhythm and Hughes was treated by the director.
Yeah, I remember that too. I was trying to keep my politics and awareness of that out of aside and try to look at just in the purity of the film and what they achieved. I agree with you though, because I remember it was very controversial because the irony of the fact that they were getting an Oscar for best effects while at the same time filing for Chapter 11, which fortunately they did get bought out by another company, so I think they continued to stay in business after that. That's a good thing at the end of that story. So they didn't go completely under. They just went down for a while, but I think that eventually did survive. But the total irony that they could do such great work and then in the process not only have to financially fail temporarily, but not to get shouted out by the director. I don't know if he was instructed to do so, or if there's some other power that was intervening there, but that would have been the right thing to do, considering that movie was a big success was because of what the special effects were done on that show. I didn't know it was a digital tiger. Did you know when you watched that film?
I don't remember.
Okay,
honestly.
well, I didn't know. I didn't know that it was in advance, and I certainly didn't know watching it that I was going, "Oh, a nice digital tiger." The fact that it fooled me the entire time, and I found out later, was like, "Oh my God, that thing was digital." That blew my mind. So, quite the achievement in special effects.
Yep,
and great storytelling too.
Okay, so moving on to my number 4. My number 4 is a movie called I, Tonya. I, Tonya is a 2017 American biographical comedy drama film directed by Craig Gillespie and written by Stephen Rogers. It follows the life of figure skater Tonya Harding and her connection to the 1994 attack on her rival Nancy Kerrigan. I really, really liked this movie a lot, and we saw this movie together.
Yeah.
And the reason I liked it so much is because it was a documentary style film done in a way I'd never seen. And what I had learned is that they interviewed the real Tonya Harding and her ex-boyfriend to have them talk about their memories of what happened. And what the director said is they both told completely different stories about their side. And so they decided to just weave that into the movie. And so you literally have the actors playing both these characters on camera, documentary style, talking about what happened, and they conflict each other constantly. And it was funny because it's humorous when that happens. So I really liked that side. And then Margot Robbie gave such a great performance as Tonya Harding. I still think about the scene where she is looking in the mirror and just starts to cry, and the camera never leaves. It's that, that moment in the film that actor has to shine. So, and Allison Janney's performance as Tonya Harding's mother. Allison Janney was the type of character, whenever she shows up, you're sucked in. She's like the bad guy of the movie, and you like spending time with her. So, for all those reasons, I have to pick I, Tonya as my number 4.
No, that is a surprise, but I do remember that movie and I enjoyed it too. In fact, we did a review on it back when we had an earlier YouTube channel before called The Parking Lot Movie Guys, and did a very extensive review on that movie. And I know we both enjoyed it, and yeah, it was good. It was a good, like you said, behind the scenes look at the real life story. But the way they wove the comedy and the conflict between characters and really getting into what it might have really been like for these guys who were in this very controversial and scandalous thing that happened behind the scenes in the figure skating world at that time was a fun thing to go on a ride with. And they did a great job. I remember one thing that stood out is they did a really good job of creating the ice skating sequences. They did. I remember they did a lot of I can't remember
a lot of visual effects.
The visual effects to it, but they made it really look like she knew how to skate, and they shot it in a way where they're kind of the cameraman skating along with her, and I think they did some digital face replacements to put her face on the skater's body, but a lot of really good gritty type of filming to make it look, not the usual type of shots you'd see in sort of a skating show. It was very gritty and edgy like that. And
they found a camera operator who knew how to skate. And had him out there skating with her. It was great.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Yep. Good one. I'd kind of forgotten about that movie. That's a good one. Okay. Number 4 is The Revenant. The Revenant is set in 1820s America. Fur trapper and frontiersman Hugh Glass struggles to survive the harsh winter after an oppressive re-Indian attack and a mauling from a hostile maternal bear. Abandoned by his crew, Glass attempts to cross the bleak wasteland with only a single notion set in his mind: revenge. Revenant was that was one of those movies where you stop and have to go, wow, I can't believe these guys pulled this off. Kind of like 1917, which we did a review of, where in a lot of ways the filmmaking approach transcends the movie itself. The movie itself still was good, and I think and DiCaprio went to all kinds of depths of suffering to pull off the character in this movie. But I think it's the story behind the film that makes you appreciate that what these guys pulled off was nothing short of miraculous. A lot of this film was shot, I think the director really wanted to give it a Alejandro Inarritu. He wanted to really make things feel and look genuine, like they're really out in the wilderness, not studio stuff, really in the natural elements. So they went to all parts of the world to go where there's snow. He wanted to shoot with all natural lights, so sometimes they'd be out there for a whole day waiting for the sun to come out, and they'd only get a little bit that they could use. So this thing went way over budget, way over schedule. And DiCaprio, now he must have been so frustrated not winning an Oscar that he said, all those years, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna even eat a buffalo's liver if I have to. And so, word was that he really embodied that character and suffered out there in the cold. And like I said, he did eat, I think it was a buffalo liver, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He took a bite of a real buffalo liver just to, it wasn't a prop, it was a real thing, so that, to really try to be what this character was going through. And it was a pretty major suffering on his side, which I appreciate the fact that he did that. But the film was quite an achievement in cinematic history, and it was very powerful the way they. When you watch the film, again, any of those movies like 1917 where you go on a journey and at the end you feel like you've gone with this person and suffered with him, really makes you have to tip your cap and go, job well done.
Not on my list, but any movie with DiCaprio is going to be a good movie. And this movie was great. We got to see it together. The scene with the bear is probably my most memorable moment.
Oh, it's intense.
In that film. Super intense. And just the whole time you're thinking, how did they do this? How did they do this? It looks perfectly 100% real. And when you read about how they did it, it's amazing in itself.
Again, another example of digital creatures, very well done, that you can't tell. Call of the Wild people, again, not to hammer these guys too much, but that film, I think it just pisses me off, the fact that Harrison Ford is starring in this movie and it's so badly done that I'm like, why are you wasting this actor on this piece of garbage with the worst effects I've ever seen? Anyway, Revenant did not do that, and their effects were quite amazing. So definitely a standout scene. Hard to watch because it's so well done.
Yep. Okay, so moving on to my number 3. My number 3 is a movie called Whiplash. Whiplash is a 2014 American drama film written and directed by Damien Chazelle, who went on to do La La Land. It depicts the relationship between an ambitious jazz drumming student, played by Miles Teller, and an abusive instructor, played by J.K. Simmons, at a fictional Schaefer conservatory. Whiplash is one I kept trying to get you to see, kept telling you got to see it, and finally we were on a business trip, and I remember we sat down in the hotel room that evening, and that's usually when you go to sleep. We try to watch a movie in a hotel room after a long day of working, and you did not fall asleep during that movie. Didn't even come close. And that's because J.K. Simmons sucks you in so much whenever he's on screen as just this militaristic, music teacher that is just bad all around. But Whiplash is obviously a story about a drummer who wants to become great. And what's probably the most memorable moment in the movie for me is a scene where he is talking with his teacher, J.K. Simmons, and J.K. Simmons talks about another moment in music history where someone had a cymbal thrown at them. And after that happened, he went back and worked really hard and came back and gave one of the most incredible musical performances of his life. And his point is that the biggest problem in our civilization society today is that too many people are just told good job, and nobody ever gets anywhere by getting told good job. That you get somewhere by being told you need to be better and you need to work harder. And that's why that movie deserves to be in my top 3, not only because of the great performances, but because of that subtle message of the film, which, again, nowadays everybody gets a participation award. We got to make sure everyone is told good job, and that's what this movie is saying, is by doing that, you're not giving people the chance to truly become great and grow, because when they're told that, they just think, okay, and then they don't try harder. So that's why Whiplash is my number 3.
Whiplash is not on my list. However, it is a movie I considered. I remember looking at it going, wow, this is really good, but I don't know if I can squeeze it in here. It definitely had an impact. What's his name? What's the actor's name?
J.K. Simmons.
Very recognizable, especially now he's doing all those farmers insurance commercials. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. But that was before that point, I think. But that was probably one of the most plays a really good badass in that movie. And you just felt constantly, and he's in the room, was tense the whole time, feeling like, I don't want to mess up. I don't want this kid on screen to mess up because I don't want to see what he's going to do when he messes up. It's that tense of a feeling of this guy is going to be on you, watching your every mess up. And even when you think you did good, he's going to find something wrong with it. It's very contradictory to the world we live in today, where we are such a society of, like you said, participation trophies and good job, positive everything, and no one really kind of gets raked over the coals. But it is true that at a certain point, and it reminds me of back when we played high school sports. I don't know if it's that way now, but back then, I mean, it felt like when we played football back in the day, our coaches were like military dictators.
They were.
I mean, they punished us, they ran us, they did everything. And that was back when coaches and teachers could hit kids. So I mean, there was nothing spared. I mean, if we messed up, we got punished for it. And so it reminded me of those days, because we don't see this type of, behavior anymore. It does one thing that kind of relate to, not in the same exact way, but that feeling of your teacher angry at you. I took this music composing class from a composer named Hummy Man, and I got to basically everyone student in the class. I was new to composing, and I wanted to take this class to challenge myself, and we had to score a short film, and so we all did it. And I had written a score for this film called Vinny the Fish, and it was I'd finished the arrangements, but I did it on my computer. The problem was when I had to transpose all the different notes, because every instrument plays a different key. Your piano is in a certain key, but the French horns are in a different key. It's transposed down to a different scale. Well, the problem was when I transposed it the wrong way. So on all my notes, on the day that we had the orchestra in the room to perform all of our scores, Hummy's going through it and he's looking at it, realizing I'd messed up big time. And so he's in front of the whole orchestra, he's correcting everything, and he's just berating me. He's just telling me, this is why you don't use a computer. And I felt this small. I'd never wanted to just be somewhere else in my life, because you had all these musicians. You were there. I mean, it was a terrible time. I felt terrible, and it reminded me of being around this guy. Even obviously not as abusive, but that feeling of letting your music teacher down, and feeling like a complete heel. And that was one thing that it kind of reminded me of, is at that moment. And it wasn't that he was a bad guy. I messed up. But in this show, the guy couldn't do anything without his teacher seeing that he'd messed up. So
yeah, Norb actually had me at their videotaping,
shooting behind the scenes
performance, because it was a big deal. And Norb comes up to the camera and he says, "Yeah, I just talked to Hummy, and he said, Norb, you messed up." Except I'm paraphrasing. He didn't say mess. He said
there's
something
a certain
else.
F word in there.
And the question is, how would you have felt if Hummy had been really nice and just said, "Norb, good job. Good job. You gave it everything you had. You tried hard, and there were a few things, we fixed them for you, but hey, good job."
Yeah,
good job. How would that have affected you?
I don't know. The thing is, this was at the end. We just had to get through the recording session. So at this point, there wasn't much to do. I mean, this was the last day. It was like, fix it, and we got to record. So it wasn't like I was going to learn and move on and continue to have experiences in class. This was like the finale. This was the final. And so, I felt bad enough, but it was even worse to have him have to point this out with everybody to see, but I did learn from it. I mean, I definitely realized I'd screwed up, and could have been handled differently. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a kid. I'm an adult at this point. I was like I can't remember how old I was. 20s. I was in my late 20s. But yeah, it was traumatic, but more in the sense of how I failed at the moment of the biggest crucial moment of the session. But his handling of that, I deserved it, but I certainly learned from it. I'll never forget that again. But I haven't had to do that again since. I haven't scored with an orchestra, so I'm left with that being my last experience. For better or for worse, I mean, that's what I ended up with. So,
well, aside from the problems, you're a good composer, and I remember it was a nice little tune you came up with. And even though there were computer problems, it was a great tune.
We did resolve it, and it was one of the coolest things. It went from one of the worst moments trying to get set up, and once everybody was set, to listen to an orchestra playing one of my scores where everything's been synth, was pretty amazing. There was just something about, it's like, wow, this orchestra is playing my music. This is awesome. So it did go from one of the worst experiences to when we finally recorded it, it was like, wow, this sounds pretty freaking beautiful. So
probably the only time I've ever heard you write for a mandolin.
I had a mandolin, yes, because it was an Italian show about a Vinny the Fish. It was like this Italian gangster show, and at the end, the guy gets killed with a fish. He's beating him like Goodfellas style with a fish, though. So it's kind of a little corny and satirical, but yeah, I had to play a little, with an Italian vibe to it, and it was cool. I could not simulate that on a synthesizer. So there's something about the real thing. So anyway,
all right, moving on to number 2.
Oh wait, I haven't done my number 3 yet. We were so long talking.
We were still talking about
your Whiplash. I never got to need my number.
I think when it segued into the Hummy Man story, I just kind of lost track. My apologies. All right, your number 3.
My daughter just made a surprise appearance and gave me a couple of pieces of chocolate. So welcome to the show, Vanessa. Thanks for the treats. Number 3 for me is another Christopher Nolan show. It's the movie Inception. Inception is the 2010 science fiction action film written and directed by Christopher Nolan, who also produced the film with his wife Emma Thomas. The film stars Leonardo DiCaprio as a professional thief who steals information by infiltrating the subconscious of his targets. So another Leonardo DiCaprio movie, another Christopher Nolan, I should say, was mentioned in the beginning in Dark Knight, even though he's technically not supposed to be on that list. So second time I'm mentioning him today, though. Inception, we also saw this film together, if my memory serves correctly, if my subconscious hasn't been stolen. But this was one of those movies where, again, you hit certain films which sort of hit you in a, wow, that was something different. And this one was... my reaction was, this was like Matrix to like the 4th Degree. That was what it felt like. And the Matrix blew my mind then in late 90s, where we'd never seen a movie that did such a good job of creating that. Here's reality, and here's that subconscious alter reality. Well, Christopher Nolan took that Matrix level from here's reality, here's a second reality, and here's a third reality, and a fourth reality, and I can't remember how many levels they went deep.
Well, it's a dream within a dream within a dream.
So, and so as you're having to understand how this world works and how you get into the sub-levels and then back out of it, you have to really think about what's going on. And anytime you do those types of movies, it's like, if you got to hold on tight or you're going to get completely confused. I know a lot of people did. But it also, when you catch it and you're hanging on and you understand it, it makes the wrap up at the end where you get kind of talk about what you just watched that much more memorable. And I think we had a long conversation about in the parking lot what actually happened, what was the ending depicting. Right. A lot of debate about how that movie ended and what the interpretation was. And anytime you have a long discussion after a movie, that always is a good sign that that's going to probably end up in a top 5. So for me, Inception was in the top 3 for me.
That's not in my top 5, but a great movie. Christopher Nolan has made lots of great movies and continues to. I think his next one looks just as interesting. I can't remember the name of it, but we've been seeing the trailers.
Oh, that one is, yeah. It's like there's
reverse time.
Yeah, they have a bullet hole going through, and the guy's looking at it. And that does look
Inception, cool. The best moment of that movie was really the fight in the hotel hallway where they used the rotating room trick to make it feel like that gravity was changing constantly. And I loved this I think it's the MC Escher stairway that keeps going around and around moment where the stairs. I liked all those little nods to.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool slow-mos in that. Constantly where like the car's crashing and everybody's like getting thrown around while they're unconscious. Super, super slow-mo glass flying. Great effects, where the cities are bending and stuff like that. But that's really not the highlight of the movie. Those are just vehicles, additional eye candy to tell this really well thought out script. And I understand Christopher Nolan actually had this draft. He had it pitched before. This is early 2000s. He was going to pitch it, but I think he realized either the technology wasn't there yet, or he just hadn't quite developed his film career enough to feel like he's ready to tackle and deliver this kind of film. So he went on to do Dark Knight, and then the what's that one with the other Nolan film, the one with the magician. I got it. I forgot the other name.
The Illusionist?
I think that's it. Anyway, there was a second one after that, and then he came out with this film when it was finally ready, and he got that thing sold. Really on the heels of the success of the Dark Knight. Anyway, so good movie, good one, and I own this one. Very good one.
All right, so
number 2 for you.
Moving on to number 2. So my number 2, Norb, if there's a chance you and I are going to have the same movie in the top 5, this is it. Because my number 1 I know would not be on your list. And my number 2 is a movie that I owe a great thanks to you for telling me to see it. So by the look on your face, we probably don't have the same one.
I don't think so. I think I know what you're going to say.
But if it wasn't for Norb, I never would have seen Kubo and the Two Strings. Young Kubo, who's played by Art Parkinson's peaceful existence comes crashing down when he accidentally summons a vengeful spirit from the past. Now on the run, Kubo joins forces with Monkey, played by Charlize Theron, and Beetle, played by Matthew McConaughey, to unlock a secret legacy. Armed with a magical instrument, Kubo must battle the Moon King, played by Ralph Fiennes, and other gods and monsters to save his family and solve the mystery of his fallen father, the greatest samurai warrior the world has ever known. Again, I would have skipped this one, but Norb said, we saw it, it's good, you should see it, it's really good. And I took my son, and I remember 10 minutes of the movie, I was already in, and I thought, I can't believe how good this is, and there's an hour and a half to go. How are they going to keep it at this level? And they did. All the way to the end. I mean, from the visual style, the way they told the story with a lot of traditional stop motion animation techniques, as well as using visual effects to enhance backgrounds and make things cool. They did a lot of visual effects on this movie. But this movie just comes down to the story, and it was a wonderful story. It had some great twists towards the end, and I got teary-eyed. It captivated me, and it was such a different kind of film from just not only the story but the way it looked. But it had a lot to say about life and cherishing life and life's moments and what it means, to remember the people who are gone. All those kind of themes you see in a lot of movies. But this movie did it in a way that just really, really worked for me.
Yeah, I remember the day telling you about that film. We went down to South Center and watched it. Didn't really know much about it. I just knew it was stop motion. And by the way, this didn't make my top list, but when we start talking about stop motion animation, it's definitely going to be in there. So that's coming eventually. But I watched it, and anytime there's a stop motion film, period. I used to do stop motion, and so did you. Just messing around when we were younger, and the level at which they do it now, and the amount of time and detail and the intricate levels of what it takes to make a stop motion film, it's hard not to just stop and go, I already give you props for doing this in the first place, because that is an old style thing where you literally have models and you put it up there, you take a shot, and then you move it a fraction of an inch, take another shot, and this goes on for thousands and thousands of images. And the thought of how the patience and meticulous attention to detail you have to do a movie like that just by itself already takes a certain unique individual. But when you pull it off and then you have a wonderful story like they did in Kubo, it's great. And I feel like this is one of those movies that's kind of not as known, that people probably probably haven't shown their kids enough of, because I just don't think it got as much publicity as it probably deserved. But it's a great film, technically as well as the story that it tells. And yeah, it's got a little bit kind of scary stuff in it, but nothing that your kids can't handle. But yeah, the theme of it is really good. Remembering those past, and also trying to live your life to the fullest and pursue your dreams and stuff like that. So it's a great story. A good choice on your end. But no, it didn't make my live action movies list, but it'll definitely be on my stop motion when we talk about that. All right, so going to my number 2, I didn't have a Marvel movie earlier, but technically this one is, and this is Deadpool. Deadpool is the origin story of former Special Forces operative turned mercenary Wade Wilson, played by Ryan Reynolds, who, after being subjected to a rogue experiment that leaves him with accelerated healing powers, adopts the alter ego Deadpool. And armed with his new abilities and a dark, twisted sense of humor, Deadpool hunts down the man who nearly destroyed his life. It was directed by Tim Miller. Deadpool, I love this film, and I don't know if you're surprised that this being on my list or not, but this is a film that it's not like your typical superhero movie. We've seen a lot of Avengers movies, a lot of DC films, but this one just decided to go its own path, and I love them for it, because they decided, we're not going to cater to the kids. We're going to make this movie something the kids aren't allowed to go to. We're going to make this thing rated R. And it's not even something where normally you'd think this is a smart move to make a comic book character R-rated. You're basically saying, we're going to make a movie that your kids know about, and they're not going to be allowed to see it, which seems to make no sense, but I loved it. And as adults, we love it all the more because it's unapologetic, it's ultra violent, it's got a lot of language. I mean, everything why you can't show this to most of your kids, but it has such great comic value, and Ryan Reynolds is really good in it. And if you haven't seen it, it's not like your typical action hero film. It just leaves you laughing, and it's constantly making fun of the genre, making fun of itself. And it's just so clever in the way that it's written and the way Ryan Reynolds delivers his dialogue. And they have one of the best opens ever in a film, comic book or not. It's just one of the coolest opens you'll ever see. And so
I was going to bring that up. That's probably the most memorable part of the movie to me, is the open. It's a slow-mo action moment, super duper slow, where they bring all the credits. But what makes it so memorable is it's done to Juice Newton's Angel of the Morning, which is a song you would never ever think of being in a movie soundtrack ever.
Right.
And yet it works. And then the credits themselves are funny, where the one I remember, because I have such a great respect for writers, is it says written by the real heroes.
Yeah.
And so it's that right there is why that movie was great.
It set the tone, and it told you this is where we're going, folks. So you're going to be seeing something you haven't seen before, and you're laughing the whole time. So that's what put it on my number 2 on my list.
All right. Well, we are down to number 1, and it'll be interesting to see what you think of my choice. But my choice is a movie called Hugo.
Oh, good
Hugo
movie.
is a 2011 adventure drama film with steampunk influences, directed and produced by Martin Scorsese and adapted for the screen by John Logan. Based on Brian Selznick's book, The Invention of Hugo Cabaret, it tells the story of a boy who lives alone in the Gare Montparnasse railway station in Paris in the 1930s. So, Martin Scorsese has made many, many great films. And what I respect about Martin in this movie is Martin wasn't afraid to do a movie in 3D. Now, 3D these days has not lasted like many people hoped, but Martin wanted to give it a shot. And one great thing about Hugo is there's real 3D and there's fake 3D. Real 3D is when a movie is filmed with 2 cameras side by side, just like your eyes, that create the 3D image. Fake 3D is where it's filmed with 1 camera, and then the 3D is all done in a post-production process. So Martin shot this movie with real 3D cameras, which he would never do it any other way, a traditional filmmaker like that. But this movie, what's interesting about it is the description I just shared with you doesn't mention what I actually think is the largest special part of this film, is that this film celebrates the wonderment of movie making, because the story eventually goes down a path where Hugo becomes friends with George Millet. Apologize if I didn't say that French name right, but George
I think it was
Millet.
George. Yeah, I did. George Méliès, I think is what it is. And by the way, isn't it Scorsese? Martin Scorsese?
I think you know why I think Scorsese is because there's a movie Cameron Crowe did in the 80s called Singles, and there's a scene where this woman is introducing Tim Burton as the guy who makes video dating, online dating, and she says, he's going to be the next Martin Scorsese. And I think
she says it wrong
because
on
I heard
purpose.
that, I think it just ingrained in my brain that you say Martin Scorsese.
Yeah,
So,
I believe it's Scorsese. But anyway,
Yeah.
Anyway, Scorsese, whatever.
I digress.
But George Méliès. And,
George Méliès and the famous filmmaker who has the image of the moon with the bullet in the moon's head. But he was really the first filmmaker, so to speak. And the movie celebrates the beauty and wonderment of filmmaking. And as a filmmaker myself, I have to make this movie my number one because it celebrates what I've dedicated my life to.
That's good. I love this movie. Saw it in the theater. I don't think I saw it in 3D. I can't recall actually if I did or not, but either way, it's good 3D or not. But yeah, this was a great story. I remember I had no idea where it was going. There's a lot of beautiful sets. You just didn't know where was this. It's one of those kind of, you get on a journey with this young boy and you meet different people and you just don't know where it's going to lead you down. And then it finally leads you to this appreciation for cinema. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did a documentary thing, a school project in college about George Méliès and his early films, and they showed a whole bunch of stuff from there, and it was cool. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was going here. So that was a nice surprise at the end, that the fact that they're talking about filmmaking and the early films, and that's what the story was about. You just didn't really know that until you got there. But yeah, this is a good choice, and my kids actually enjoyed this film too. They really liked it. So again, young and old could appreciate that movie, Hugo. Was you ready for my number one?
I am ready.
I'm sure you have no idea what it is.
I have no idea.
Even for myself, I kind of find myself looking at it going, wow, did I really put that there? But I think I did. Number one on my list for the top 5 movies of the 2010 decade is Mad Max Fury Road. You might think first right away a mindless action movie, but I remember we saw this together, didn't we?
I think so.
I think we saw this together. I thought we saw it with our buddies. Anyway, Mad Max Fury Road.
Yes, we did. We saw it down at Tukwila. Yep.
Okay, that's what I thought. Years after the collapse of civilization, the tyrannical, immortal Joe enslaves apocalypse survivors inside the desert fortress, the Citadel. When the warrior Imperator Furiosa, played by Charlize Theron, leads the despot's 5 wives in a daring escape. She forges an alliance with Max, who's played by Tom Hardy, a loner and former captive. Fortified in the massive armored truck, the War Rig, they try to outrun the ruthless warlord and his henchmen in a deadly high-speed chase through the wasteland. Directed by George Miller. This movie we've seen a lot of action movies lately. I mean, there's so many action movies that you kind of get a little bit numb between all the Fast and Furiouses and Terminator. There's just so much, action and CG that happens these days. And what was so cool about watching this film was it brought me back to the appreciation of what they did with the Mad Max series before, when they would go out there and just drive vehicles in the desert and crash them up, and it was for real. And this was similar in that you really felt like these guys just made a 2-hour movie of a nonstop truck chase throughout the desert with crazy vehicles and people jumping and swinging on these bending poles going side to side with a dude with a guitar with flames coming out of it. I mean, it was so crazy, but the whole movie felt like it was all on some kind of radical post-apocalyptic steroid, session. But it was so much fun. It was just one stunt after another. And to hold up that intensity throughout the entire thing was just, again, one of those, wow, how did they make this film? And yet it was really a fun ride with the Max character as Charlize Theron. She's kind of like a one-armed, rebel driving this truck. And I think just the fact that it was this show that practically the entire time had, but with one break in the middle, was almost nonstop action. And that's hard to do and to do well. But the inventive production design, the props and the vehicles, the way they had the characters interact, could go from one to the other, was really quite an achievement in the action realm, which we've seen so much of. But they found a way to make it unique and quite spectacular.
I cannot think of a movie more bizarre, more out there, more creatively strange, but yet super fun. Mm-hmm. Or I showed it to my wife, and she kept looking at me going, this is just crazy.
Crazy.
And you got dudes on poles swinging back and forth, but it was fun. And I give him that. I mean, I enjoyed the movie. It's not my top 5, but I enjoyed it. I would give it an award for the most weird, but fun. All wrapped in one.
As filmmakers, I think at any point during a film, we always step outside and think, as a producer or director, how would I approach making this film? What would it have been like if I was on set trying to direct this? And when I would see these setups where they have dozens of vehicles all driving at the same time with multiple cameras, flying cameras, driving cameras, people on rigs, people with fire, and it's all happening, and you have to coordinate this crazy, a band all moving at the same time for this 2-hour epic. That's what blows my mind, is how long and how big this thing was, and how you'd have to the challenge of trying to keep this thing organized and running for an entire film. That's just what is amazing, is just the epic, immense scale of this, and trying to keep this fiery circus on wheels rolling and still keep as an interesting story. So to your surprise, and even for mine, until I actually did the list, my number 1 top 5 movie of the 2010 decade. There you go. We had no crossovers, did we?
Nope. We still have some honorable mentions. I have one. I assume you do. And,
yeah.
So maybe that'll be a crossover there, but I will share my honorable mention. I have to pick a Quentin Tarantino film. He's had a few in this decade, but he is a great filmmaker, and I've enjoyed his films a ton. So I got to pick one, really, to honor him. And so I'm picking Inglourious Bastards, which is in Nazi-occupied France during World War II. A plan to assassinate Nazi leaders by a group of Jewish U.S. soldiers coincides with the theater owner's vengeful plans for the same. Now, this movie is listed as 2009, but it came out at Christmas 2009, and it trailed into 2020, 2010, which is actually why in the IMDb database, it's listed in 2010. So I'm getting it from the IMDb database, so there's probably debate.
You bent the rules a little bit, and that covers for my faux pas with The Dark Knight, which was 2008. So
and again, I have to blame IMDb for putting it in there in the first place. So
yeah, okay.
So I'm going to just go with it. I'm going to say, it trailed into 2010, and really, I do pick it though because it's a Quentin Tarantino film, and Quentin Tarantino needs to be somewhere in my list somewhere. So that's why I've got it there. But this movie is the one I picked over all his others, because I can never remember another time where I felt such tension. Quentin can create these tension in scenes like no other director. And the opening scene with the German military leader interviewing the townsperson, trying to, find out if he's hiding Jews in his house somewhere. I mean, the way he's asking for a glass of milk and talking about how good this milk tastes. And then he very politely says, do you mind if we switch languages? Could we talk in English? Are you okay with that? And of course he wants to talk in English because then he knows the people hiding underneath won't know what he's saying. But he does it so nicely and friendly. It's just, but yet this guy has the ability to grant life and death to anyone. And so the tension was unbelievable. And that's just how the movie started. And obviously it continues. Brad Pitt plays just this great character with this funny accent the whole time. Or just talk like that. He's just got a hilarious accent. And he's so entertaining. So the movie, it's tense, it's violent, it's funny, it's memorable. So that's my honorable mention.
That's a great film. I love that opening scene. Whenever I talk about creating suspense and tension, I always go back to that scene because it is one of the most tense scenes that doesn't feel like it should be tense, but because of the actors delivering the lines and the writing, he is so good at that. And you're right, I feel guilty for not putting Quentin on this list in here because I don't have him on my list. And he's not even in my honorable mention, even though 2 or 3 of those films could easily have been on there. But I think I was feeling a little guilty because I was picking all these big sort of epic movies. And so I decided to go with something a little bit smaller, and that was the movie Lion. And it's the story of a 5-year-old Indian boy who's adopted by an Australian couple after getting lost hundreds of kilometers from home. 25 years later, he sets out to find his lost family. In 1986, Saru, which is the name of the character, was a 5-year-old boy in India of a poor and happy rural family. And this movie was I don't know if you saw this one. Did you see this movie?
No, I did not see it.
Okay, well, I would suggest that you and others out there should see it. It's one of those lesser known movies, but it's one that it takes place in India. The main character is Indian, and it's just based on true story. So that's the other part of it. But it's that story of a person who grows up, he's adopted, and he gets to a point in his life when he, gets out of, he's in college and he starts to question who he is. Where did I come from? What's my background? I would imagine anybody who's adopted at some point in their life, they want to know where they came from. Who was their family before, and how did I become separated from them? And it shows his desire and how he fights so hard to find out in a very poor country where it's hard to really, find very specific addresses. He's able to track them down and reunite. It's a very touching story, and reminds me of movies like Slumdog Millionaire that take place in that kind of environment where they go from really rags to riches, and then he go back to his rags and reconnects to the people from that he grew up with but hadn't seen in years. Anyway, it's a really touching story, and it's based on a true story. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's a good one. It's not epic in scale. It's very small and indie, and but it's very good. I highly recommend it. So you've got what? I'm excited to see what we have for our surprise today.
Okay, so my surprise today is a little different. It's more of a tribute to what it means in the movie world to go to a movie at the theater. So, as I've said before, in my life, when I've seen a movie that affected me in some way or was just a great movie that I had a great experience, I remember where I saw it. I remember what theater I was in, and usually pretty close to the time of my life that it happened. And this has been a sad early part of the year for me because a movie theater that is in the area where I live has closed. And that is the Issaquah 9 Cinema.
Oh, really?
And the Issaquah 9 Cinema has been around for a long, long time, and it was Regal, and then Regal came in and built the Regal Highlands, which is a newer theater in Issaquah, and I thought that the Issaquah 9 was going to close, but they turned it into a Cinebar, and that was actually good. I was relieved because I have so many memories of going there. That's the theater where I took my son to see the Muppets, and he was sobbing in the middle of it and asked me if we could leave. Because he was scared of something. Something scared him in that movie, and so we left. And also, I took him there to see Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, which he also asked if we could leave, because in the middle of that movie, it got pretty violent and disgusting. So
sound like you'd be happy that theater's closed down because I have so many bad memories for your son.
No. I'm just getting started.
Okay.
Just getting started. But one of my best memories is that's where I took my son to see Avengers Endgame. And what was great about going to the Cinebar there is the Cinebar was it was Regal, but you couldn't reserve your seat. And so when Avengers Endgame came out, it was really hard to get to the theater to see that movie because it was selling out like crazy. And so Cinebar, you couldn't pick a seat, and so you had to go old school and get there 2 to 3 hours before the movie started and get in line. And that's what we did. And it was a great way for me to show my son what it used to be like back in the 80s when you always had to go to the theater early and wait in line outside the block for hours just to get in. So it was really fun to be able to just even have that experience. And I wasn't even the first in line. There were people there ahead of me.
Jeez.
And I also saw Tron Legacy there, which is one of our favorite films. And I would save ticket stubs from a lot of times of my theater adventures, and I saved my Tron ticket stub from 2011 when I saw Tron at the Issaquah 9. And so what I just wanted to express is that it's really sad for me when a movie theater closes, and they close the theater and apparently it's going to be turned into a business park. So what I'm getting at is a place that I have so many fond memories has now closed and is no longer somewhere where I can continue to see movies. So really my surprise today is more of a tribute to the Issaquah 9 and the loss of a movie theater. And I know you can relate. I mean, we've talked often about the movie theaters we saw movies at growing up that are gone. I mean, bulldozed and gone.
Yeah, I did not know that. There a lot of our favorite cinemas were the one theater cinemas back in the day where I saw Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark and movies like that. South Center, they tore that one down. It became a Bahama Breeze, and of course the multiplexes took its place. Those were always sad to see go, because there was just something special about that one theater that had that one big movie in it. But then, I think just now it's just weird that we're in this time, the unprecedented time with the, coronavirus right now. The fact that we can't go to movies. Usually whenever things are slow, you could always go out and see a movie. Well, we can't even do that. And hopefully, the theaters will still be around, because I'm sure the movie industry is definitely struggling during this time. Hopefully when things finally return to somewhat normal, they'll still be around, to be there for us to go watch, because I know this is hitting them hard, not being able to show movies, go to movies, all that stuff is all hanging in the balance. So going to the movie theater is still something you and I both enjoy doing. And even though you can watch on a big, huge TV at home with a nice sound system and all that and save a lot of money, there's just something about that going to the theater with the smell of popcorn and sitting down in the seat and watching that with the trailers coming up and the previews and everything. There's just something about that event, which me and my family, we still enjoy, and I know yours does too. And I hope we continue to do so, but it's constantly changing, and this recent string of events has not helped turn the tide, I'm sure, with the way things are going right now. But hopefully we will get back to those days, because I miss it. This is the longest stretch I've gone without going to a movie.
I've always said that the movie theater is my second home. It's the place where I almost feel at home as I do at home. And I love going. Every time I walk in, I'm very happy. It's so when they close down, it's in memoriam, Issaquah 9, thank you for the great memories. And I would also say, Michael, thanks again for suggesting we do the show. This has been the longest show in the history of The Watchmen. Yep. So, Michael, we have you to thank for that. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening and especially our podcasters. I'm glad you're multitasking while you're listening to us. I think that's a great way to enjoy what we have to say, but still be productive in whatever you need to do.
All right. Well, I think long overdue now. We'll wrap this up. But again, thank you for watching The Watchmen. For those of you on YouTube, please continue to do so. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and like this video, because it helps us out a lot. And again, like Mike said, the podcasters out there, please, or podcast listeners, please keep subscribe and listen to what we have to say. I hope you're enjoying what we're talking about. But we will continue to do so. And let us know if you'd like to hear us talk about any particular TV show, movie, or any topic. Send us a note in the comments, and we'll be happy to take a look. Again, I'm Norb.
And I'm Mike.
We are The Watchmen.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching The Watchmen.
Please click on here to watch other episodes, and be sure to hit that like button too.
And please subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll always be alerted to any future episodes.
It really helps us out, and we appreciate it.
We'll see you next time. And remember, we'll be watching.